We begin this morning, though, with a big loss for the Biden administration in the Supreme Court and its efforts to enforce sweeping COVID vaccine mandates for large private companies.
It was a 6-3 ruling. The court, led by its conservative majority, wrote that OSHA, that's the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, did not have the power to regulate public health. In a statement, the Biden administration said it was disappointed by the ruling, arguing that if his administration had not put vaccination requirements in place, quote, we would be now experiencing a higher death toll from COVID-19 and even more hospitalizations. Here to help us break down the ruling and what it means moving forward, we've got NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos and Dr. Bob Lahita. He's a professor at the Hackensack Meridian Medical School and the director of autoimmune and rheumatic diseases at St. Joseph Health. He's also the author of Immunity Strong. Good morning to both of you. Danny, we'll start with you. The ruling comes just 3 days after the mandate went into effect. Talk to us about the reasoning behind the Supreme Court's decision and what impact it could have on any future legal challenges to vaccine mandates.
The court essentially concluded that OSHA overstepped its bounds. No surprise when you consider a justice like Gorsuch's history. This is something that Gorsuch has always been cautious of, is what he called the regulatory behemoth, the idea that the regulatory agencies of this country, who are not elected and who don't go through a democratic process in order to create law, simply create rules that govern the country. And so no surprise, if you've been following Gorsuch's career, that this is an opinion that would come from a court upon which he sits. Basically, the reasoning is that OSHA has a job to regulate workplace safety. COVID-19 affects people everywhere, irrespective of being at work, whether they're on the street, whether they're anywhere, whether they don't have a job at all. And so for that reason, OSHA overstepped its bounds when it went from just regulating safety measures at work to regulating public health generally. And for that reason, the mandate's put on hold. It's not struck down. It's not gone forever. That seems to be the Supreme Court's increasing role these days, is ruling on temporary restraining orders and injunctive relief, which really just hits a pause button until the issue is resolved at the court below.
So, Dr. Bob, I mean, we're dealing with a record surge in cases due to the Omicron variant right now. What are your thoughts on this ruling when it comes to public health? What might be the impact?
The impact is going to be great, Joe, because most hospitals, I would say virtually 99.9% of the hospitals in the country are taking Medicaid and Medicare funding. So they would be under this rule, and that all employees, that's all employees of any hospital, will have to be vaccinated protectively. Now, doctors' offices take Medicare and some take Medicaid, and clinics do too. And I don't know how the ruling is going to affect private physicians and their care of patients. That's interesting. Then the second point is police and fire do not take government funds unless they're in a specific category, and neither do EMS people. But some EMS programs do take Medicaid and Medicare funds for their transports, for example, critical care transport. So they're going to be under the gun as well.
Yeah, I want to talk more about what you're talking about there. It was a separate 5-4 decision from the Supreme Court. They did allow a similar vaccine mandate to stand for medical facilities that take Medicare or Medicaid payments. So, Danny, I'll ask you, talk to us about the reasoning behind the court's split decision on both of these mandates, why they were okay with one but not the other.
The power of the spending power. It's nothing like the Commerce Clause power, but quietly the federal government can regulate what a lot of people do in the states using the power of the purse. And this is no exception. The court is essentially saying that facilities that accept money from the federal government in the form of Medicare or Medicaid do have to comply with vaccine mandates. And that, of course, is a separate issue than simply OSHA broadly saying that thou shalt have either testing or be vaccinated. It's a separate analysis, but basically the court is saying that as long as these facilities are willing to accept the money, then they have to comply with the rules that come along with that money. So not a big surprise there. The court, at least in the last decade or so, has been increasingly accepting of the spending power and actually giving it a pretty broad interpretation.
So, Dr. Bob, let's talk more about that decision. It's going to cover 17 million healthcare workers in 76,000 medical facilities. We know, you know better than any of us, the medical field has been dealing with a shortage in healthcare workers. Do you think this ruling has any impact on that shortage? Are we at the point now where most healthcare workers are vaccinated? What do you think could be the impact of this?
It depends on the institution, Joe. We have mandated the flu vaccine, for example, for many, many years. But right now, this is going to result in a lot of healthcare workers, doctors and nurses resigning or being terminated from their positions. Not so much a big problem in the Northeast, where these mandates have been in place for many years, but in other parts of the country, rural hospitals, for example, and in those states which are not really highly vaccinated, this could have a major impact on staffing.
Yep, good point. That's exactly where we could see the biggest impact of this. All right, Danny Cevallos, Dr. Bob Lahita, thanks so much for helping us break down these big court decisions.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.